Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the decline of empires, and I've sort of been encouraged to do this vid. It was on one of my list of future ones to do, but I saw yet another end of empire video from Black Pigeon or Navy Hato, and I always like his stuff. And so I looked at the video, and I guess I don't agree with why, or not agree with all the reasons, at least why empires decline. Black Pigeon, and have a look at the videos. Only just posted it, I think, today. The Black Pigeon talks about Sir John Glubb and his treatise on why and how empires decline and the causes and that sort of thing. And I want to talk a little bit about my views on that and how I was, and still am to some extent, but was at the forefront of watching the international Western empires decline. Now, decline can in visible terms, so the very visible end of decline can occur fairly quickly. So, let's take the British Empire as a case in point. In 1914, it appeared to all that the British Empire was this impregnable superpower sitting atop of the world and had this vast trading network. 50% of all ships on the water were British, whether it be in trade or naval warships and that sort of thing. The Britain was a serious heavy hitter. One of the biggest, richest empires in human history, and that was in 1914. 31 years later, just 31 years later, the British Empire, Britain was a second-rate power, not sitting atop anymore, but a second-rate power, and struggling even to be a second-rate power, bordering on national bankruptcy. So to go on from being one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest country in the world, or empire in the world in 1914, June of 1914, come June of 1945, 31 years later, it's a bankrupt nation that is hanging grimly onto its place as a second-rate power. That's how quickly it can occur. 31 years from being the absolute, or appearing to be the absolute supremo, to being struggling to even be a middle-ranking power. Now, the fact is that the seeds for the decline of the British Empire were already in play before 1914. In fact, they were becoming evident, as we look back in particular. And it's very easy to look back, years after the fact and go, well, there you go, there it was, there's the evidence, look at that. But at the time, it's not so easy to see it, and certainly not looking forward. There were those raising the alarm bells in the British Empire in the 1880s and 1890s. But everything seemed fine. Why would anybody care? Why take risky action, risky remedial action, when everything seems okay? But in fact, the seeds were there. Now, there's a few things. There are a lot of new technologies that were coming into the world, such as the new range of chemical engineering, electrical engineering, electromechanical engineering, these sorts of things. They're creating a whole range of new products. There's also mass production, precision engineered steel down to micron level. There are all these things were occurring, and the British were falling behind in this because they were doing so well in other areas, and they were such big players in things like international insurance and shipping and what are called in trading terms, what are called invisibles. That is just not a product, but it's a financial transaction. The City of London stock market, all this sort of stuff. As far as anyone could see, that Britain was doing very, very nicely. Thank you. Why? What problem? There's no problem. But in fact, there were. The British were falling behind on all of these technologies. And more importantly, the United States and Germany, the two big rising powers of the day, their populations were increasing very considerably and increasing with people of the first rate. So very well educated white people, urbanized, that sort of thing. And on top of that, Britain, the United States and Germany were using tariffs to protect what they saw as their strategic industries. And they weren't using these tariffs to create slothful industries in monopolies that did bad work and produced rubbish products and that sort of thing. They were using these tariffs to protect the development of products that were of the first-rate products. German engineering was just first rate. Particularly in the areas of metallurgy, but not confined to that. Mechanical engineering, electricals, chemicals, and so on. Optics. The Germans were just running ahead at a rate of knots. The Americans were also doing well, particularly in areas of say mass production and again precision engineering, interchangeable parts, where the British were falling behind in that area. If you had the same company manufacturing the same product but across two different factories, the chances are the parts were not interchangeable. That's how piss poor the then quality of metallurgy was in Britain. So Britain was actually falling behind. It was already there. The circumstances for its decline were already in play. Things were in play. Now the British, the moneyed class, if you will, they went off chasing new frontiers. It was just too hard and too risky. It was difficult decisions. It was hard decisions. Because if you're going to develop wealth at home or in Britain, you have to make hard decisions organisationally, technically. You have to have the top class managers, the very best engineers. You have to be the best. You have to be good. You have to be good at what you're doing. And this is very hard here. This means the buddies you've put in the key roles, you've got to start getting rid of them and say, hey, dude, you're not good enough. I need to get people to know it. Then you have to change the managers. Organizational structures have to change. You have to start working with the universities to produce higher quality students and graduates and all these. There's a lot of things to be done which are hard and difficult to do. It's easier just to just let it go. We're doing all right. Who cares? Because the effects of not doing anything aren't immediate. They don't come and hit you over the head straight away. They are spread over years and indeed decades. So that when the hard crunch comes and you realize, holy shit, the horse has bolted, then it's kind of too late. Then you've got to do radical surgery to try and fix it. So Britain was already in decline. Now this because it was so hard to make decisions at home as far as the moneyed class saw it, or the executive level of the managerial class, they thought it's much easier just to go and invest in the United States. Why don't we just go invest over there? Why don't we invest in South American railroads, or why don't we invest in copper mines in Chile, or this sort of thing? So they went where they looked for new frontiers, or they would put money into developing lower cost raw materials in, say, the colonies. So there would be investment in sheep farming or beef cattle farming or something like that in Australia, or sheep farming in New Zealand or something like that. They'd invest their money there and try and lower the cost of the raw material inputs. And so that was where the emphasis was, rather than creating the quality of the product at home and investing in value-add engineering. They went the other way. Now, there's only a certain amount of benefits you can derive from those sorts of investments. Unlike products where you can keep on adding value through more efficiencies, better designs, these sorts of things, there's only so far you can go in reducing raw material costs in terms of, again, the inputs, such as cattle farming or wool, sheep farming and wool in Australia, or investing in American railroads and those sorts of things. There's a limit to that, or a ceiling on it, whereas product development, you've got much more latitude to create high profit and get higher results or better results, which are in turn reflected in national wealth. So that was the direction the British went in. And of course, when the crunch came, and they had to fight 2 world wars with an adversary in Germany, where the value of their economy was in their engineering at home. Then that's where the British realised that they were just couldn't play in that league, and that played out over two world wars. The quality of the German products, the quality of their engineers, the quality of their military officers, their training, organisational development, all of these sort of things were well ahead of where the British were, and this was the cause of the British expending vast amounts of wealth just trying to play in that league where they couldn't really play anymore. Let's look at now why empires decline. That was the British thing. But I started noticing this, and I'm a young guy now in the 1980s. That's when I first started doing international business, and I was going all over the world doing business in every continent and every place, and was able to see the stark difference between doing business in the Western world and doing business outside of the Western world, and the varying degrees in between. There were places that were on the way up, on the move, like say Singapore, for example. You could see hey, these guys are starting to get it together. Then you go to a third world country, another third world country, and whether it be Thailand or parts of Africa or South America, and you go, ooh, these guys have got a long way to go. So I was able to see that international sort of trade and international transfer as well. I was able to see it up close. I was, right at also in the areas of product manufacturing and development and research and development, interacting a lot with first-rate engineers. I was in awe of some of these people. And also I was sitting at the table with people, the guy who invented the technology to print high quality color photographs on a desktop printer. I personally knew the guy who developed that technology, and other guys like him, very impressive dudes. You're sitting in an airport in, I don't know, John Newell Airport or something in Austin, sitting there having a coffee or waiting for a plane, and because we're going to go to like New York or something, and I'm sitting there talking to the guy. People are walking by, they don't realize that this guy is a giant of technological development. I'm sitting there having a coffee with him, chatting, people just going by, unaware of who he was. But anyhow, I digress. But I had a close-up look at this as it sort of panned out, and I could see where Western businesses and the body politic in line with Western businesses, they're looking for new frontiers. Okay, they've made a lot of money, they're doing very well, and they start to become quite risk averse. They're very interested in protecting what they already have and not letting anything get away from them. So that preparedness to take risk and find new frontiers, that was starting to really be exhausted as the 1970s rolled on. And they're looking, well, where can we go for easy, low risk, high return, easy money? We don't want to take a risk, but we want a guaranteed outcome. And that mentality was developing then, and I started to see it in the 1980s, and certainly it really picked up speed in the 1990s when the globalists began to take over. So we've got a fear of risk, a real desire. I want to keep hold of what I got. I don't want to risk any of that, but I want to get high returns, low risk investments in the future, and I want those frontiers. And I have to work with governments. We've got to bribe international governments. So that's when the ideas came up. Let's get more women in the workforce. That'll reduce wages. It gives instant consumers. Add water, and it'll suddenly sprout out of the ground. These women are already adults. They've already been to school. All we got to do is get them out of the home and into the workforce. So we'll squeeze them with the cost of living, so that'll force them into the workforce, and we'll promote divorce as a desirable lifestyle choice, so that we'll get lots of women into the workforce. We'll make marriage, become an option to consider alongside working, and so we'll do that. That'll give us instant consumers, instant workers, give us cheaper workers. Then there was that side, and then it was the idea of creating monopolies. So the idea of companies buying each other or cross ownerships through boards of directors and this sort of thing, which created virtual or effective monopolies. So instead of competing on quality of product and on price and something, the idea would be to try and control the options that the consumer has and then artificially increase prices without having to worry about developing better products or better services. So you've got monopolies as the second part. The third part of it is, how do we create new markets, new economic frontiers out of the third world? Remember, in the 1970s and 80s, or even from post-World War, you've got the first world countries all doing business with each other, and each could specialize on things that maybe suited their economy or access to raw materials or whatever. But so Britain and the United States were doing business with France and Australia. So all these first world countries are doing business with each other, and it worked very well, by the way. But they were exhausting their new economic frontiers. That they were exhausting the easy money, high return, low risk opportunities. They were being exhausted. So they thought, well, what are we going to do now? How are we going to find new frontiers? And this is where the essence of empire's decline, I believe, lies. So they have to find these new frontiers. So the globalists or the the money privileged class say, I know what we can do. Why don't we transfer the shittier factory jobs why don't we transfer them to all these low wage basket case economies in India and China and fucking Mexico, wherever? Why don't we just transfer those jobs over there? That'll build up their economies. They then can buy our first world goods and services, and we created a new market. And so let's just do that. Now, the inevitable question is, well, if we send jobs offshore, what are our own people going to do? Well, that's an acceptable casualty. That's just a bit of collateral damage. But what we're doing is we're creating entire new markets. Broad sweep of the hands as someone stands next to the the market board here. We're creating brand new market. We're changing the world. New markets, new consumers. China, 1.4 billion consumers. Whoa, I'm going rock hard just thinking about this. Whoa. So they think they're creating new markets, new consumers, and to do that, they must transfer wealth away. So they're taking wealth that's been created by the ingenuity and hard work of the original inhabitants in the successful economy, and they're transferring that ingenuity, those jobs, those organizational structures. They're transferring that to the basket case economy because of its low wages that would never be able to indigenously produce that level of technology or that level of organization. So they're just transplanting it. But in so doing, they're taking wealth away from the original country, the West in this case, United States, Australia, and so on, and moving those manufacturing jobs offshore. Now, in countries that had a small manufacturing base, or the smaller manufacturing bases, that didn't sort of affect things huge. Because only 10 or 15% of the jobs were related to manufacturing. If you transfer half of those offshore, that's kind of not a huge thing. But when you've got an economy that maybe has 50% of the jobs are related to manufacturing, and you transfer off a big chunk of that is a big issue. That does create a lot of changes within that original manufacturing high value add economy. So you've got all the high value add economies are transferring their jobs, their factories, and so on, their organizational capabilities, their technologies, their intellectual property. They're transferring all of that to places like China. Now, China would never, I mean, the growth of China has been 10 times more than it would be if the West hadn't transferred its jobs and technology there. So, India is the same. These are all basket case countries that could never have got off the ground. There would have been no economic liftoff in these countries had it not been for the West to send those jobs. But these countries are not buying Western goods and services anywhere near the rate that would be necessary to have made that wealth transfer worthwhile. So here's coming back to the decline of empires. And we see this in ancient Rome, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So on one side, they're changing the social structure to try and this is empire's decline, changing the social structure to get to discover these new economic frontiers. That is, women entering the workforce, promoting divorce, these sorts of things. which in turn has other effects like fewer children being born, which then creates an artificial demand for importing labour from third world countries, which is further socially destabilises. Then there's the pursuit of or this hanging on to wealth and not wanting risk. So there's this risk averse thing. So let's have monopolies and oligopolies and price cartels. Look at the COVID thing and all the pharmaceutical drama that went on there. I mean, is that not a cartel, for Christ's sakes? Banking cartels, the list goes on. So there's this monopolies, which then removes market competitiveness and capitalist competitiveness, which was at the very engine room of the wealth creation in the first place. Because if you're going to compete and win, you must be good. If you've got a monopoly or a cartel, you don't have to be good anymore. You just fucking bribe somebody and then deliver inferior products and inferior services. So you've got that monopoly side going on, which ebbs and destroys and undermines wealth creation and the mechanisms through which wealth is created. And then the wealth transfer. This is easy. Instead of having to really devise, better products and better services, and why don't we just transfer all those jobs over to these basket case third world shithole economies, and that'll just create new products and create new consumers, and it'll be cheaper products. We can bypass the competitive economics of our own country. We can create this artificial economy. And that'll do. So then you get this wealth transfer away from the high value add economy, which in turn feeds back into a loop where lower managerial capability is required. Less and less managerial capability is required when there's less and less competition to produce the best product and best services. This in turn is now eating away at the wealth from all directions and creating artificial competitors that would never have been competitors under any other circumstances or conditions. So I believe this is the essence of decline of empires, where the wealth continues to decline, the managerial quality continues to decline, the ability to create new wealth declines, quality of education declines, absurd notions of insane notions of equity and these sorts of things come in. And we see this, whether it be in ancient Rome or other empires. I think ancient Rome is probably one of the better examples, that they ran out of economic frontiers in Rome and Italy. And so they started to say, well, why don't we economically develop all these regions outside of Italy, and whether it be raw materials, grain from Egypt or various produce from North Africa and all sorts of things like that. Animal husbandry further out into north of Italy, into Germany and Gaul, or France as it is now. So they started transferring their wealth out and subcontracting, if you like, the defense and security of the empire to these people who weren't Romans and didn't, they're happy to take what they could get out of Rome, but they didn't really want to contribute very much, which is really the imported class coming into the West today. They are here in the West to take, not to give, not to share, not to add value to, just to take. And which in turn is undermining the fabric of the empire. Because if you or me or anyone else is surrounded by people who don't give a shit and don't care, then you say, why should I put my neck on the line? So these brown and black people from other countries who don't give a fuck about our country, who've never created any of the wealth, who couldn't have created the wealth, they just don't know how. All they've come here is to take. Why should I risk my neck so they can keep on taking the wealth that I and my ancestors created? So these are I think these are the basics of empires' decline. Now, this is how it played out in real time, and I saw this as I was going around the world doing business all over the place. And it got to the point where at the beginning, when I started doing this, and I was going to these third world countries, they treated me almost like a demigod, which I found very disconcerting, by the way. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was rather embarrassed by it. And I noticed that the big multinational firms American firms in particular, but others as well, they, not so much the Germans, but the Americans in particular, Canadians too, they would, rather than come into the third world country and try and understand how business was done or how it worked or what they needed to do to be successful as a value-add business, instead of that, they took the view of just buying market share. Now, buying market share included just flooding the market with goodies and giveaways, bribing everybody like fucking could, employing politicians, sons and daughters and relatives into key roles in the local branch office, all these sorts of things. There was not even the slightest attempt to create an organisationally efficient, effective business. Far from it. They went completely the other way. Now, when I arrived, when I appeared on the scene, this was very much how business was done. The big multinationals just flooding the market with candy and giveaways of every description just to buy the market share. And I came along with a different view. My view is no. You've got to show us how you're going to add value. I'm not going to just give you a whole bunch of shit to give away. And I found a lot of the people that I was talking to say, hey, look, this is what the American companies are doing. They're doing, they're employing my sons and daughters and aunts and uncles and nephews and cousins and all this sort of thing, paying them big bucks and giving us slush fund money to look after the politicians, all this sort of stuff. And, all you're saying, they were talking to me, all you're saying, Billy Bob, is that we have to work hard and do a good job. You got to be kidding. Why don't you fuck off? And so when you're exporting that sort of sloth and incompetence and ineptitude and corruption, not that these places weren't corrupt to begin with, by the way, they definitely were. But where there is no requirement to be efficient, effective, to know what you're doing and all that sort of stuff, when there's no requirement to do that, then it's a form of downward spiral where you create a situation of not only inefficiency, but contempt for your own presence and your own image and your own brand. And in this brand's twofold, being the brand of the product and the brand of the Western managerial efficiency. So I noticed over the years how increasingly these third world countries began to view us, the white Westerners, with increasing levels of contempt, to the point where, say, between 1985 and 1995, that 10 years, at the beginning, again, they were treating white people as demigods. By the end of that 10 years, it was starting to come across as sneering contempt, and where these people, particularly around Asia, but elsewhere too, they were talking to me of, and this is over lunch when I'm the only white guy there, having a lunch where they're openly saying, look, the era of the white people is over. It's finished. You'll be lucky. Even though we sit here at the table and talk to you, you ought to thank us for that, because you white guys, you're finished. It's over for you. And that was the type of conversations being had, which is a rather sort of, whoa, okay, gee whiz, do you expect me to pay for this lunch? Hey, so it was, and this is part. So the empire was declining in real time in front of my eyes. The Western Empire, the United States in particular, and so the seeds of destruction were already there and well on the way. What we're seeing now is the advanced stages of it. The transgender this and all that stuff. This is just an attempt to just destroy Western society, and the globalists are going at it as hard as they can. I think they'll not only fuck it up for all of us, but I think the globalists will really fuck it up for themselves as well. They may be sitting there thinking, gee, we're doing a good job. Let's create 1,000 Dylan Mulvaneys. That'll finish the Western society off. That'll crush those straight white males. They may be thinking they're rubbing their hands in glee, but I think it's the end. The end of the empire is upon us. And I think if they successfully prevent Donald Trump from, and they're working hard at it, by the way, prevent President Trump from returning to office in 2024. That's the last chance the West has. And the globalists know that, by the way, which is why they're trying so hard to stop him. But he's now the only chance left on the chessboard. But without him, it's over. And again, the globalists know this. But I just want to talk about that concept, or not concept, that reality of empire decline. It's not as abstract as it may seem in Gibbon's Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, or Glubb's Rise and Fall of Empires, or any of those Rise and Fall of Empire type books. And there's quite a few of them around. Kennedy's Rise and Fall of the Empires. That's quite a good one. Andrew Gamble's book about the decline of the British Empire is also excellent. There's typically other things at play there rather than the big abstract notions. And I think the reality is this pursuit of easy money frontiers and lowered profiles of risk and so on, but particularly where the kernel of the value out of the economy is being sent offshore and is no longer residing where it should be, in the original creators of that value add. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.